England on Boxing Day 2003, two West Yorkshire police officers, Neil Roper and Ian Broadhurst, spotted a black BMW parked outside a betting shop in Leeds. They had no idea that in just a few minutes, one of them would be dead.
Suddenly shouted, "Gun!" And there in front of him was a black handgun. The first shot hit PC Broadhurst into his abdomen and he went down.
The gunman, 37-year-old David Bieber, fired 4 shots at 3 officers. PC Broadhurst was hit in the stomach. Bieber took stock and fired again.
That policeman was not a threat to David Bieber. He didn't need to be killed. He was already incapacitated. He was laying on the floor, begging to live. This man is evil. They have to find this individual and they have to stop him from killing somebody else.
David Bieber had executed PC Ian Broadhurst, the first police officer shot and killed in the line of duty for over 7 years.
Bieber is one of the most cold-blooded, calculated, belligerent, brutal killers it's possible to imagine.
David Bieber had blasted his way into infamy as one of the world's most evil killers. In November 2004, bodybuilder David Bieber was at Newcastle Crown Court, charged with the murder of a police officer. The 38-year-old American, who was a wanted man back in his homeland, had travelled to the UK under a fake name and passport. Court reporter Paul Cheston covered the high-profile trial.
David Bieber came to this country, a man full of rage, pumped full of steroids, irrational, violent, short-tempered, and with the amount of weaponry he had accrued, he was probably the most dangerous man in this country for decades.
An audio recording of PC Ian Broadhurst pleading for his life was played during the trial, a plea that Bieber chose to ignore.
Murders of police officers are thankfully very rare in this country. In fact, I would say the sheer cold-blooded murder of a defenceless prone man who was already injured and was posing no risk to Bieber was about the most callous act of any murder of any police officer in this country.
This killer's story begins over 4,000 miles from Yorkshire in Fort Myers, Florida. The son of a respected high school principal, David Bieber was a popular and successful student.
Bieber did have what appears to be a normal childhood. He was the all-American kid. He came from an average, regular family. He participated in sports at school. He was described to school friends as being polite and personable. So nothing appeared to be amiss.
Bieber was incredibly talented when it came to athletics. He had set a state record for swimming in the breaststroke and was extremely good at football. And all of these things probably led to him thinking that competition and athletics was going to be his key to success.
Bieber failed to turn his high school success into a college sports career, and in 1984 opted to join the military.
Bieber signs up for the US Marine Corps and he learns how to use weapons during his training. Now, here is a young man who has always been congratulated on his success before. He's used to that constant appraisal all of the time, and I think he really would have struggled in a military environment where you don't get approval all of the time. You have to earn that respect.
It proved to be the wrong career path for Bieber. After a year, he went AWOL and was eventually discharged from the Marines.
He was somebody that was so competitive and always was able to get what he wanted and do what he wanted to achieve. It's the first time that he felt failure, and I'm sure that was very difficult for him.
Searching for a new challenge in life, Bieber headed to the local gym.
Bieber becomes involved in bodybuilding, and this is very much a continuation of him wanting to win. He doesn't just want to be a bodybuilder, he wants to be the best bodybuilder. And in bodybuilding, the bigger you are, the more respect that you command. And winning is so important for Bieber. He always has to come out on top.
He was actually very good, and he started to win competitions and started to put himself into more competitions. However, he then moved on quite quickly into the use of steroids and other drugs to enhance his bodybuilding.
This is incredibly revealing for me because it's not enough to just participate. He has to win. He has to be the best bodybuilder. But for him to win, other people have to fail. And I think he quite enjoys that side of winning.
Bieber was enjoying success in competitions, but elsewhere, the authorities were having to rein him in. In 1990, he was given a restraining order after attacking a woman and her daughter. And just 4 years later, he was issued with another, this time for assaulting an ex-girlfriend.
Here is somebody who is used to winning. Here is someone who's used to getting what he wants. And he sees women very much in the same way. They are prizes to be won. They are objects to be possessed. And when he gets into a relationship with a woman, he sees her as his. She is my prize. She is my trophy. I get to decide what happens in this relationship. And in situations where women leave him, women don't do what he wants to do, he becomes incredibly angry. And here we see the manifestation of that.
This is very unusual because he was a very law-abiding citizen. He was in the military. He had never had any type of antisocial behavior in his past. And it really makes you think that his steroid use was partially responsible for the outrage and the violent nature of the behavior he showed.
As Bieber continued his bodybuilding with the help of artificial aids, he became increasingly aggressive.
Steroid use has both a mental and physical impact on the people that use it. Physically, it of course enhances their muscle growth, but it will also give them several side effects that are both emotional, physical, and psychological in nature.
You develop a short temper, flashes of violence, irrational, random, sporadic, but very, very dangerous. And the amount of steroids that David Bieber was pumping into his own body took this to a whole exaggerated level of violence.
Bieber became a man who was, in every sense, addicted to steroids, and then progressed even further and started to deal in steroids himself. So he almost segued from being a bodybuilder who used steroids to someone who was addicted to steroids and someone who started to sell steroids for a profit.
It seems that Bieber ended up selling steroids for a few reasons. One was he was able to make the money that could fund his own steroid use and bodybuilding, both of which are relatively expensive to do. But the second was it put him more at the center of this world. He was a broker in a lot of ways for a drug that a lot of people wanted, but he had access to and they needed him for. And it was also something that he could feel like he was a mover and shaker, if you will, which he always wanted to be. That was something that he was when he was in high school and he was popular. He was the center of the attention, and this is something that he wanted when he was in the Marines, and now he was able to get in the bodybuilding world.
During his bodybuilding career, Bieber crossed paths with German-born weightlifter Marcus Müller.
Bieber was frenemies, if you will, with Mueller. They were both part of the same bodybuilding community. They were friends, they participated in the same type of workouts together. However, they were also enemies in the sense that they were competing in the same community.
Muller has another attraction to Bieber in that has rather a beautiful girlfriend called Danielle Labelle, whom Bieber really, really fancies. And so, believe it or not, a love triangle develops. This is in the autumn of 1994 and into early 1995. Bieber decides that he's going to marry Danielle.
After just a week of marriage, she leaves him for his friend, Marcus Mueller. And this must have been devastating to Bieber, not only because he lost his wife, but she left him for this friend and rival that he had. And I'm sure that was just incredibly infuriating, especially for a man who hardly ever lost, and he did not handle failure very well at all.
But the key thing to remember here is that Bieber doesn't feel any kind of sense of real closeness to Marcus Mueller. He is only close to him when he's useful to him. So when that relationship sours, Mueller needs to watch out.
Mueller arrives back at his apartment, and outside, suddenly, 4 shots ring out. 3 of them hit him, and he drops down dead. This was clearly a targeted shooting to take out Marcus Mueller.
Marcus was discovered by the woman at the heart of the love triangle between the bodybuilders.
Danielle was the one who found Marcus Mueller dead and alerted the police, and that's where the murder investigation started.
They quickly came to the conclusion that there was one prime suspect, and that had to be David Bieber. They pulled him in for questioning, but Bieber had already prepared his defence, and that was he wasn't there. He had an alibi. He was elsewhere at the time.
Just a few months later, another person from David Bieber's past was targeted by a gunman. Michelle Stanforth, an ex-girlfriend, was shot at by a 17-year-old named David Snipes.
Being the young, inexperienced teenager that he was, he staked out the location of where she lived in exactly the same way, fired 4 shots and missed every time. It was the greatest escape in Michelle's life that she was able to avoid being hit, but this was unquestionably an attempted murder.
A tip-off led police to David Snipes, who, under interrogation, also confessed to shooting dead Marcus Mueller. But the teenage gunman claimed he was hired by another man, John Saladino. And, sensationally, Saladino told detectives he had indeed paid Snipes $1,000 per hit, but it had all been financed by his friend, David Bieber.
Saladino and Snipes were both arrested for their involvement in the murder of Mueller and attempted murder of Michelle. There was a lot of suspicion, but without a confession, it was going to be difficult for Bieber to be convicted for the murder and attempted murder of the people that he had many motivations to want to kill.
David Bieber was questioned in connection to Marcus's murder and released pending further investigations. The bodybuilder was a prime suspect for the killing and the attempted murder of Michelle Stanforth. He came up with a plan to flee the US before any charges could be brought.
He uses a method that was first described in Frederick Forsyth's novel Day of the Jackal. He goes to a cemetery and looks for a child who's died young, gets a birth certificate, takes it to the authorities, and is issued with a driving licence and a passport. The child's name is Nathan Wayne Coleman.
From this moment on, Bieber is no longer David Bieber, he is Nathan Wayne Coleman. And he arranges a visa and flies off to Europe, landing in France. He then takes a ferry and arrives in England in 1996 and heads north to lose himself in English society.
Bieber settled in Yorkshire, hidden under his new pseudonym Nathan Coleman. Just 17 days before his tourist visa expired, 31-year-old Bieber married a woman named Denise. But the relationship didn't last long.
She said that he seemed to be constantly a man on the run, a man looking over his shoulder, a man thinking that the authorities might catch up with him at any moment, which is deeply suspicious at the best of times.
The ghost of his past haunts him. He can't even unpack his suitcase. He's always ready to be on the run and fleeing law enforcement at any moment. And this impacts his relationship with his new wife, where she's very curious about why he's so guarded about his past and why he seemingly lives out of his suitcase after being married to her.
Bieber appeared to be trying to start a new life for himself, far from his dark past in Florida. But old habits die hard.
He became a bouncer at a number of different nightclubs, and he started to frequent different gyms. He continued with his interest in bodybuilding and also his use and selling of steroids.
Again, he was pumping himself full of these bodybuilding drugs with this very dangerous side effect, and it was building up into almost a ticking time bomb who would explode with rage at any moment.
Bieber remained off the police radar for over 7 years, but on the 26th of December 2003, he would announce himself to British authorities in the most dramatic fashion.
That morning, 2 police constables on traffic patrol, PC Ian Broadhurst and PC Roper, had had breakfast together. They'd become friends. Broadhurst was the younger, he was only 34, Roper the more experienced at 43. But they were on duty on that particularly grey Boxing Day morning in 2003.
On a routine patrol, Broadhurst and Roper noticed a potentially stolen car parked outside a betting shop in the Oakwood area of Leeds. And their instincts were correct.
You've done it again. That was a stolen one from November last year.
Behind the wheel of the black BMW was David Bieber, reading a copy of the Racing Post and eating a chocolate bar. He had no choice but to cooperate when approached by the 2 officers.
At that moment, the suspect was calm and cooperative, and he went with them and sat in the back of the police car while the 2 officers phoned in to get the suspect car removed. At that time, Bieber had his hands in his pockets and refused to tell the police what was in his pockets. Up till then, the 2 officers had no reason to suspect that he was anything other than being calm and cooperative.
Well, I think it's quite unexpected on his part to be picked up by the police. So in this situation, he's got to think quickly. He's got to act on his feet. So he goes straight for the manipulation. He's engaging the officers in conversation. He's trying to see what he can get them to do for him. And he's just buying himself some time in doing so.
Now we need to go back to the police station.
Everything that's been said in this car is being taped at this present time, all right? As my mates told you, under arrest because that vehicle's stolen in a burglary.
Absolutely no, I did not steal the car.
Well, we're not saying you did.
He starts to engage in conversation. He's claiming that the car he was in wasn't stolen, and he's asking PC Broadhurst, how did he know that it was stolen? So we can see his sort of manipulation starting to come out a little bit here. He's engaging the police officer in conversation, and when Bieber engages someone in conversation, he's basically testing them out. He's seeing how much they know, he's seeing how willing they are to talk to him while he plans his next move.
Where are you from, please? Are you from Leeds?
Leeds, yeah.
What's your country of birth, then?
Cardiff.
He said he was a Canadian, and you could hear that he was nervous. The 2 officers was now starting to suspect that this is a very big man. He was clearly a bodybuilder. and that if push comes to shove, this could be trouble if he decides to kick off in any way.
After not very long, in the back of the police car with the two officers in the front, Roper decides that it probably would be safer to handcuff Coleman and calls for backup on his police radio. And he gets out of the car, and another police officer, police constable James Banks, arrives at the scene.
It's when their suspicions are aroused enough that's when they start talking about handcuffing and searching him, and that's when this stop goes horribly wrong.
Just for transporting you, it's gone. Sonny, all right? No, I got claustrophobic. Well, yeah. I'm sorry, you can't sit behind us when we're... Right.
Bieber was in the back of the police car. The two officers were outside. As Roper went to open the back door...
Don't!
4 shots in 3 seconds. 2 shots hit Roper, who slumps. 1 shot hits Broadhurst in the stomach, slumps to the pavement too. Roper drags himself away from the scene. And believe it or not, Banks is saved by the fact that the bullet that was aimed at him hits his police radio and ricochets off.
That's one of the only reasons why that officer was able to survive. He was extremely fortunate, but unfortunately, PC Broadhurst was lying there on the ground helpless.
When an officer is injured, the first priority is to make sure that there's no further danger to other officers, and then to get medical assistance as quickly as possible. And that's what the officers did. They were calling for help, they were calling for assistance, and they realised their own officers had been shot.
Carnage had rained down upon a quiet street in a suburb of Leeds. As Ian Broadhurst lay on the ground, incapacitated, David Bieber could have chosen to run.
Wounded, Ian Broadhurst is pleading for his life. It is truly terrifying.
He was defenceless, he was unarmed, he posed no risk to Bieber if Bieber wanted to escape at that moment. But instead, Bieber stood over him and putting 2 hands to his pistol, and from a range of barely 2 feet, 24 inches, fired straight at this defenceless officer. The first shot that hit PC Broadhurst in the head passed through his left hand and through his right arm before striking his head, clearly showing that he was in a futile attempt to ward off the bullets that he knew he was coming. He put his hands in front of his face. Having fired into his head and into his abdomen, Bieber then ran from the scene.
One of the things that really struck me was the fact that he didn't actually need to kill PC Broadhurst. PC Broadhurst was already incapacitated. He was laying on the floor. He wasn't a risk. He couldn't stop him from running away. Other than wanting to kill him, there was absolutely no need, and it was not necessary.
It is horrifying, utterly horrifying, utterly unexpected, utterly unbelievable. We are talking about a suburb of Leeds in Yorkshire on a perfectly ordinary afternoon. It's the first time for 7 years in the history of the police in Britain that a serving officer has been shot and killed while on duty.
Passers-by, including a taxi driver and a nurse, tried to revive PC Broadhurst. Their pleas for help can be heard on the police car's audio recording.
Hello? All right, I'm a nurse. Can you hear me?
No.
Can you hear me?
I've got nothing. I've just come out of taxi.
Right, can you hear me?
Bieber could have just made a run for it. He didn't need to continue shooting at the officers. He did not need to kill PC Broadhurst. But what we have with Bieber is somebody who has to win. So for him to get away is just basically setting the playing field level. So the police have arrested him, he's managed to get away. But whenever somebody has taken control away from him, it's not enough for him to just get that back. He needs to do something else. His reaction is always going to be exaggerated and disproportionate.
Bieber fled the scene immediately and hijacked two elderly people to seize their car at gunpoint. You can imagine the terror that they felt being faced with a gun from a man unknown to them had already killed. And then drove off back to his flat in Leeds and prepared for his escape to go on the run.
A routine arrest had gone tragically wrong. West Yorkshire police were suddenly on the hunt for a cop killer.
The detectives who would have been working on this case would have had two sets of values. There would have been the values that they have for the fact that he was one of their own and their own feelings, and it could have been them. The fact that this PC was laying on the ground, he was incapacitated. He couldn't have stopped David Bieber from escaping. He was absolutely on the floor. He didn't need to die. On the other hand, they would also have the investigation itself. And as a detective, as any police officer, you have a duty of care to the victim, to the victim's family, and also the community. They have to find this individual and they have to stop him from killing somebody else.
Detectives searched Bieber's black BMW and found a copy of the Racing Post, and in the back of the police car, a half-eaten chocolate bar.
You've got fingerprints and you've also got DNA from the chocolate bar as well. When they searched that on the databases in the United Kingdom, they didn't get a hit. They didn't get anything back at all. So then they started thinking about the conversation.
Where are you from, please? Are you from Leeds?
Leeds, yeah.
What's your country of birth then?
Cardiff.
He had told them that he was Canadian. So they did do checks with the Canadian police authorities, but got nothing back. And it was at this point that the police officers decided to give the voice recording of the stop to a voice and speech specialist.
A voice expert was very quickly called in to show that this man had a very distinctive American drawl, typical of the southern states of the United States. So even though they were able to run this evidence through the police Home Office computer, they couldn't find an identification because he hadn't committed an offence at that time in Britain. But with this knowledge now that he was almost certainly an American, they sent it all over to the FBI, and very quickly they got the identity that they were searching for, that this was a man who was wanted for murder in Florida.
Investigators had initially received an anonymous tip-off that the man they were looking for was named Nathan Coleman. But fingerprints at the crime scene matched the ones the FBI had on file for David Bieber. Detectives had a new name.
At this point, police officers knew that David Bieber was a danger to the public. He was a danger to police officers as well. They needed to find out where he could be hiding so that they could capture him quickly and effectively without any further danger to anybody in the UK.
Investigations led detectives to a lockup in Leeds, rented by Bieber.
In that lockup, they found bullet-making equipment and hundreds of rounds of ammunition, which they tied to David Bieber. That was an essential part of the jigsaw in making this case against David Bieber.
Bieber had killed once and clearly had the resources to kill again. A nationwide manhunt was launched for the 37-year-old American.
He was now a fugitive, almost certainly armed with a huge amount of ammunition and quite clearly prepared to shoot his way out. So the police took the decision, now that they had an identity, that they were going to mount a media campaign saying, this is the prime suspect, this is an exceptionally dangerous man, do not approach him, but if you see him, report it immediately to the police. And his picture was now distributed and in every newspaper and on every TV station in the country.
Police were so committed to this case because it was one of their own that had died, and they made sure that the media was absolutely saturated with information, so anyone who saw something relevant to this case and the man on the run for committing these crimes would have the opportunity to say something and report it to police.
The ploy worked. An extra vigilant public was on the lookout for the bodybuilder with an unmistakable physique.
There are sightings of the man in Leeds taking money out of ATMs. There's sightings of him at York railway station, and they send an armed response team. But by that point, he's got on a train. The trouble is they don't know where the train's going to. So they have sightings, but they don't have the man.
Aware that he had a target on his back, Bieber tried his best to look different to the man whose face was plastered on billboards across the country.
Now, he thinks that he's really smart. He thinks that he's really clever, and his next move is to change his appearance. But this really is quite revealing about the limits of his intelligence, because he changes his appearance by dyeing his hair orange, a very bright ginger colour. Now, Bieber is a man that stands out anyway because of his size, because of his physicality, and this change that he makes him even more recognisable, even more distinctive. So at this point in time, we really do see Bieber for the rather incompetent criminal that he is.
Time was running out for David Bieber. By now he'd made his way north of Yorkshire to Tyne and Wear in the northeast of England, and his attempt at disguising himself from the public had failed.
One of the sightings that was reported to police of David Bieber was in a hotel in Gateshead. The receptionist there was suspicious about this person who'd just booked into the hotel. He was wearing a woolly hat and glasses, and then he'd gone up to the top floor and locked himself in.
One key detail that the receptionist in Gateshead mentioned was that she saw these dead eyes that Bieber had, and she recognized them from the videos and photos she had seen, and it really stood out to her in such a way that she almost was certain this was the offender.
She actually took out a newspaper that had his photograph on it. She drew a pair of glasses on it and covered up the top of his head to see if it could be that man.
When police heard this, I'm sure that was very telling to them, because it wasn't just a look-alike. The fact that that description was so haunting, it must have made them pretty sure that of all the tips they were receiving, this was one to prioritize and pursue.
The net was closing in on Bieber. The 37-year-old had no idea that the police had been tipped off to his whereabouts. But he was armed and ready to kill again.
This could be another bloodbath, and people could get seriously injured, including members of the public. But at 2 o'clock the next morning, in the early hours of the 31st of December, barely a week after the shooting, they surrounded the hotel, rushed into his room, and were able to handcuff him and subdue him before Bieber was able to put his hand under his mattress, where there was the murder weapon and a whole stack of ammunition, that is clearly showing that he was prepared, had he the chance, that he was going to shoot his way out.
After being on the run for 5 days, David Bieber, the most wanted man in Britain, was finally in police custody.
From that moment, he says not another word in police interviews. Nothing. Not even a syllable, not even the words "no comment."
In November 2004, 11 months after his dramatic arrest, David Bieber's trial began at Newcastle Crown Court. The 38-year-old bodybuilder was charged with the murder of PC Ian Broadhurst and the attempted murders of PC's Neil Roper and James Banks. Journalist Paul Cheston was in attendance.
When the trial started, there was massive security. I've not seen security like this at any court hearing in all my experience as a court reporter. There was armed police outside the court, there was armed police inside in the corridors of the court. All the roads in the area around the dockside there at Newcastle were blocked off, and there was a police helicopter constantly in the air throughout the hearing. This was unprecedented security, reflecting how dangerous this man Bieber was.
The prosecution was armed with a wealth of evidence against the 38-year-old.
They had his fingerprints on the suspect car and in the police car. They had his DNA from a half-eaten chocolate bar that he'd been eating in the police car. They had the murder weapon seized when he was arrested. They had his whole history of how much weaponry he had built up over this period. And, of course, they had his voice on the tape in the police car.
The evidence really was stacked against Bieber, but he is so arrogant, he has got that desire to win, that to plead guilty is just not something that is in him. He's not going to do that because that is to admit defeat, that is to fail before you've even tried. So he's chancing it now, and he thinks there's a possibility that he can win, so he's going to run this race.
Despite the overwhelming evidence, Bieber pled not guilty to all the charges against him.
He claimed that the person in the car who was arrested by the police and sat in the back of the police car and then shot the police officers was not him. It was, in fact, a friend of his from Florida, who he was not prepared to name, who, guess what, looked like him, but wasn't him. It was a pathetic defence built on such improbability that no one in their any sort of right mind, least alone serious-minded jurors, could possibly believe for a second.
PC Neil Roper, who lost his friend and almost his own life, would once again come face to face with Bieber.
One of the most heartbreaking aspects of the entire trial was to see PC Neil Roper give evidence and recount the events of what happened and the shots that rang out, and how, as he rightly ran off to raise the alarm, his close friend, PC Broadhurst, was murdered in cold blood on the pavement in the road there. And the emotion of the occasion and the trauma of what he'd gone through overwhelmed him, and he was in tears, and this was a heartbreaking sight for anybody to see what was clearly a fine police officer reduced to tears in these circumstances.
The only person in the courtroom apparently unmoved was David Bieber.
Bieber presented himself as an upright and arrogant persona, that he thought he was above everybody else. He thought he was cleverer than everybody else. When he gave evidence, he still believed in the veracity of his story in his eyes, and he thought he was convincing the jury. It was a bizarre sight that he alone, of anyone in the court, thought that he was going to get away with it.
On the 2nd of December, after deliberating for just 3 hours, the jury found David Bieber guilty of murder and attempted murder.
As the judge was to say, you could have walked away. You could have left Broadhurst. Who knows, your first shot might well have killed him. But you chose not to take that risk. You chose to walk up to him and effectively execute him with a shot to his head. It is an unforgettable and horrifying crime. Monstrous, evil act.
He told Bieber that an attack on police is an attack on us all, and he said that Bieber had showed absolutely no emotion or trace of remorse for his terrible actions. The judge decided that this, and how dangerous this man was, deserved the full life means life full tariff, i.e. he should never be released and he must die behind bars.
Luckily, the United Kingdom does not have as many horrific, brutal police killings as in the United States and elsewhere. And so I think in this case, the fact that it was so shocking, this American citizen now comes to the UK on a fake passport and pulls a gun out, which is extremely rare, and not only uses it against multiple police officers, but kills an officer point-blank execution style just for his own benefit. That's not something you see every day in the UK, and I think was shocking for people there.
In July 2008, after an appeal by Bieber's lawyers, the killer's sentence was reduced to 37 years behind bars. 9 years later, in August 2017, David Bieber attacked a prison officer with a makeshift weapon, causing injuries to her face and arm. He was charged with attempted murder.
He is somebody who values violence. Violence is currency for him. Violence is a way of getting what he wants, a way of exerting his control. So it's something that he will always use. Everybody has the capacity to change, but Bieber clearly does not want to, because I think he still equates violence with winning. He still equates that capacity for harming others with being successful himself.
In June 2022, Bieber stood trial for the attack on the prison officer. He claimed that he'd not meant to cause her serious injury, but that he hoped causing a scene would win him a transfer to another prison. The jury found him not guilty of attempted murder, but guilty of wounding with intent. It means it is even less likely that the killer will be granted parole at his earliest opportunity.
The defining moment is that if he did become eligible for release, then the district attorney in Florida has already made clear that he would apply immediately for Bieber to be extradited to the States and stand trial for the murder and the attempted murder back in the mid-90s. So there is no way that Bieber will ever be released. He will remain behind bars and will die in prison.
Bieber was an imposing figure of a man who carried out the most cowardly of acts, shooting and killing a police officer in cold blood. Whether the former US Marine is guilty of arranging other attacks, we may never know. But as soon as he stood over Ian Broadhurst and pulled the trigger, David Bieber cemented himself as one of the world's most evil killers.